Trash Taste is one of the biggest podcasts on YouTube right now, and they just released their music 3x3s, which they've been promising for a while. They've already done one about anime and manga and movies, and finally, music. So today we're going to be, well, judging their trash taste and maybe giving the boys some recs. My name's Chris, aka Sad Jams. I make a lot of videos about emo music and alternative music in general. If that is something that interests you, please consider subscribing. But for what you're actually here for today, roasting the boys over a trash taste and, like I said, giving them some personal recommendations. Honestly, the boys don't have bad taste in music, to say the very least. But I do have a couple of things that I think that they would like. Basically, the format is going to be I have a couple bands, we're going to talk about them, and then I have some spicy recommendations, which are bands that I don't necessarily know if the boys will like, but something in my gut, in my heart, tells me, and they're going to be a little bit out of left field. Connor opened up the special, aka Cdawgva, aka Sebastian, aka Monkey. I honestly think Connor had the most widely distributed taste of music. His 3x3 included Snail House, Tame Impala, Daft Punk, Bo Burnham, The Weeknd, Parcels, Breakbot, Biffy Clyro, and Henri. He talked a lot about how he didn't necessarily know how to talk about music or describe music, and that he was really just there for the beeps and the boops. But Daft Punk is on his list, so I think that it makes perfect sense that he only really knows about the beeps and the boops, along with Snail House, another basically purely electronic artist. Take a step back and really look at Connor's taste as a whole. I really think that Connor had the most diverse taste in music, which I know might come as a surprise to some people, considering that Joey is kind of known as the pretentious music nerd, and we're going to get to that. I think the things that Connor really looks for in music, that at least I can see from these, is he looks for kind of funky, kind of chill, sort of 80s electronic sort of vibe and aesthetic, and I think that the real main focus, he wants to vibe, which really makes sense for Connor as a person. So getting into Connor's recommendations, he mentioned Snail's House was one of his favorites. Now, they kind of called it weebcore, which I wouldn't say is necessarily inaccurate, but I think that the technical genre is called future bass or future house. So, Connor, if you're looking for more stuff like this, or if you in the audience are looking for more stuff like this, your best bet's going to be to look up future house or future bass on YouTube. I actually have 3 bands that I think that Connor, or if you enjoy the music that Connor was talking about, would like quite a bit. Keeping in mind what seems to be the real kind of key theme is the sort of chill, funky 80s theme with a lot of electronic use and sort of heavy vibes. The first that I have is SUPERORGANISM, which has a kind of funky 80s vibe, but they sit really nicely into like what I like to call the weird indie kind of aesthetic. Along with them, KERO BONITO, which is definitely a sort of music nerd's music, but it has a lot of the same type of vibes that I think that he would enjoy, or if you are watching this and have a similar taste, would enjoy. KERO BONITO is a Japanese-fronted band. I do believe they are technically from the UK, but they do have a couple of songs in Japanese. Now, KERO BONITO and the other artist that I'm going to recommend, Jack STRAUBER, they both are like meme music in a sense. A lot of their music has been memed, and I know that Connor really enjoys a good meme, not only just from watching the podcast, but also because he really likes Breakbot, which also has a couple of meme songs. So for those kind of reasons, I really think that those bands would fall in line with what he likes. As far as spicy recommendations for Connor, I actually only have 2. They just make sense somehow. So Sleep Token, which is a very passionate, I want to say they're kind of technically, I guess, a metal band, but there's something about them that feels very like R&B-esque and very kind of vibey. Whenever they started talking about The Weeknd and I kind of started formulating thinking about artists, this was one of the first groups that I thought of, just because they kind of have a similar vibe to The Weeknd, just heavy. And again, these are the spicy recs. The other one is going to be CHON. Mostly it's just because Joey talked about math rock, and again, we're going to get to Joey. But Joey did talk about math rock, but CHON specifically, they don't have any lyrics in any of their music, so you don't have to worry about any of that. But they're also just kind of a vibe. They're a good put them on in the car, you listen to some twinkly, interesting guitar riffs, and you just kind of vibe. And I think that that's one of the main things that Connor's music has in common is looking for that vibe. And I think CHON would be a good addition to your playlist. Next up, we have Gant, or aka Grant, or aka Giguk. His 3x3, I think, was kind of the most vanilla. It was the most bland. It was the most, I grew up in the UK and now I watch a lot of anime, that a 3x3 could encapsulate. Bands like Muse, The Killers, Daft Punk, Kooks, all very nicely fit, the Arctic Monkeys, all very nicely fit into that British indie rock kind of vibe, especially of the 2010, 2007 era, which is when Gant would have been growing up. But then you throw in like the Pillows and all of a sudden you're like, ah, yes, this is a man of culture. But what I think really saved Gant and made his taste very interesting, but also very tricky to kind of recommend music for, is that everything has an emotional attachment. Everything that he talked about was because of a specific event in his life or a specific emotion that he attached to those artists or a specific time. And I can't force anyone to have an emotional attachment to music, so it is tricky to recommend music to someone like this. But considering that all of his music included, kind of indie rock stuff, a lot of kind of bluesy garage band kind of stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of energy and catchiness, I find, especially with like MJ and Bradio and Daft Punk, a lot of energy, a lot of catchiness. But I think that the main thing, and he actually talked about this, was music's ability to create a mental image. So that was kind of my main focus going into finding bands to recommend, was artists that, for me at least, painted a mental image whenever I listened to their music. The first band I'm going to recommend for Gant is Glass Beach, which I talked about at length in my intro to Fifth Wave Emo video. But to kind of sum it up, their music feels like a theatrical, funky, pop-punk musical. They have songs that kind of capture the energy that I think Gant would like, but it also is really good at like painting a picture. There's something very descriptive and sort of moving about the music that I think that Gant would quite like, especially taking into consideration that he likes to have sort of a mental image with the music. FOXY is going to be my next pick for Gant. They have a little bit more of the chill side, I guess. They're very emotional. They are at their heart a Midwestern emo band, to bring it all back around. But I think that they do a really good job of sort of painting a picture. A lot of their music is very descriptive and it's very heartfelt, and it has these moments where you're like, I just kind of want to sing along to this. And I think that those kind of check all the marks for Gant. So the last band I'm going to recommend for Gant, before I get into the spicy picks, is going to be the Front Bottoms. Now, if you're a fan of the channel or a fan of emo music, I'm sure you're kind of laughing in the back of your head. But to me, these guys are one of my go-tos for getting people into less conventional music. The singer has a really unique voice, and their lyrics are very straightforward and easy to understand, but they do a good job of telling a story. And again, I think that's really important for Gant and what he looks for in music. And to top it off, they fit very nicely into that sort of indie rock aesthetic. And, as you go through their discography, they do get a little bit more poppy and a little bit more electronic. But again, that's the kind of stuff that Gant likes. So I think that the Front Bottoms was actually a really good pick for you, Gant. I have two spicy picks for Gant. Small Leaks Sink Ships. Now, this is a very sad music, but again, kind of the main thing here. This is my train of thought. They paint a picture. They build sort of a world with their music, and I think that it sort of falls in line with some of the stuff that you like. It's got the beeps and the boops. It's got the indie rock. It's just very sad, but it's very good. I think you would like it. The last one's going to be Weatherdays, and the main reason I'm recommending this is because Gant spent a lot of time talking about Muse and learning to play Muse songs, and there's a lot of like noisiness in a lot of Muse's music, especially with their guitars, and I think that Weatherdays is kind of just that, but cranked up just a little bit. They're a really interesting band. I wouldn't say that their music is the most great at painting a mental picture, but I think that, sonically, it would be something very similar to some of the more experimental parts of Muse, so to me it makes sense. Before we talk about Joey, and I really have a lot to say about Joey's 3x3, I just wanted to ask you guys, consider subscribing. I make a lot of videos in this sort of nature talking about music. If any of the music that I've talked about is stuff that you like, consider sticking around. So Joey's 3x3 included Radiohead, Tool, MF Doom, American Football, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Tangerine Dream, Nick Drake. Joey is indeed a very pretentious music critic, to say the very least. This 3x3 is only missing Death Grips, and it would be like the most I like Anthony Fantano bullshit I've ever seen. But I can't hate on it too hard because, honestly, kind of same. I'm also kind of a pretentious music critic, so I can't really say too much. And I actually really like a lot of the bands that you talked about and went over in your 3x3 and included in your 3x3. So I can't judge. From Joey's 3x3, I think it's really clear to say that Joey looks for a little bit more depth and meaning to the music while also being interesting and unique music. And not only just unique music, but unique music that makes you feel things. And I think that's very important. But when Joey started talking about Midwest emo, I got very excited because I love Midwest emo. I am also a Midwest emo enjoyer, so to speak. And it's kind of what inspired this video. And I really would hate to recommend music to Joey that he's probably already heard before, especially considering I don't know how deep down the Midwest emo rabbit hole he's gone, and that is kind of my field of expertise. So I'm going to avoid talking about bands like The World is a Beautiful Place and I'm No Longer Afraid to Die and The Hotelier and La Dispute. But if you haven't found those, Joey, which I feel like is probably not the case, I would check them out. But I'm sure you've at least come across them. But with that being said, that's also what kind of makes him tricky to recommend music for, because he obviously is really into music, and I'd hate to recommend a band or an artist that he's already come across because, well, that's not really much of a recommendation. So I did some digging to find some of that like sweet underground bullshit, you know. I did my best, Joey. I did my best. So first off, I'm just going to get this one out the way. I'm going to say FOXY SHAZAM. You might have heard of him. He did a song with Macklemore, Downtown. You know, the part where it's like, Downtown. That was FOXY SHAZAM. Now, I know that's not particularly underground, and I was just saying that I was going to look for stuff like that. But FOXY SHAZAM has a lot of those sort of 70s vibes, which I think is a very clear influence and enjoyment for you. But they sort of, you know, bring it to the modern era. Kind of like Spitting is going to be my next rec. And this is honestly one of my favorite Midwestern emo bands. But I almost feel like it does a disservice to them to call them that because they explore a lot of different sounds. I mean, it all falls within the range of punk music, but they go from folk punk to like almost Motion City soundtrack pop punk to like American Football and kind of everywhere in between, but all the while they're able to keep this very cohesive sound. Whenever you listen to a kind of like Spitting song, you know you're listening to a kind of like Spitting song, and that's something that I really enjoy. And they also have a massive discography of like 9 albums and like 4 EPs and some splits, so chances are you're probably bound to find something that you like. Now, I really wanted to recommend Bright Eyes and Nutrimilk Hotel, but I feel like you've probably, again, already come across them, so I'm going to recommend Me Without You. And the reason being is that you obviously love a concept album and you love music to be just a little bit different and a little bit eccentric, but also to be played very skillfully and sort of expressively. And I think Me Without You is a perfect culmination of those things. Their albums are kind of lengthy, but they're all very thematic and they tell a story, and every album sounds so different from the last. I genuinely think that you would really like them. I'd kind of be surprised if you haven't stumbled across them, but if you haven't, definitely Me Without You. I only have one spicy rec for Joey, and that's mostly because, well, you've seen his taste in music. Nothing's really probably that spicy. HAKUSHI HASEGAWA. I think I'm saying that right. My Japanese is not great, but they make just really cool and odd music. And kind of the thing that made me think about it was whenever the other guys were talking about city pop, it reminds me a lot of city pop and sort of J-pop. But what they do is they add these like drum and bass beats super fast, and then like just noise. They do really crazy things with the production where like the songs loop back in on themselves, and it's very strange and very unique, but that's why I think you would like it, because it's something that you're not going to hear anywhere else. And, you know, you are a music maker. Joey is a music maker. So listening to people with bizarre and interesting, but still well-crafted production is a great way to learn and kind of, you know, broaden your horizons. And for that, HAKUSHI HASEGAWA, really got to say that that's probably a good bet for you, Joey. Personal rec. So that's pretty much it. Again, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I make a lot of videos talking about music and such. But let me know what you guys thought of the 3x3s that they made. And, you know, if you found maybe your new favorite artist from any of the stuff that they talked about, or maybe something that I recommended them. And maybe let them know what else they might like in the comments down below. And yeah, later.